Hi, I'm Aaron Betsky, author of Don't Build, Rebuild, The Case for Imaginative Reuse, and you're listening to US Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild from poolside at the swanky US Modernist compound in Palm Springs. During Modernism Week 2025, we're going to meet Steve Treinen with a new book on the Indian Canyons area in Palm Springs. Plus, Palm Springs architect James Cioffi, who sheds light on a pervasive myth. Back in the studio, we'll hear from author Helen Thompson on Aspen. Plus, we'll get some lovely tunes from musical guest Champian Fulton. And despite his brightly colored blazers visible from space, here's the guy you'll find emptying trash, packing up audio equipment, schlepping the supply boxes, and picking up wayward glasses after U.S. Modernist parties, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thanks, Tom. You can be the CEO, CFO, COO, or any flavor of vice president. But if you're doing that job in a small nonprofit, when the benefit party is over, you're also the cleanup crew. You are dodging rogue olives and cheese cubes, tracking a stray phone left behind by a charming woman and her always irritated husband, and retrieving mostly empty glasses from every room in the house. You learn never to let guests serve themselves, as that just invites a mess, no matter how highbrow the crowd. A pyramid of tiny chicken sandwiches? No. They must be on the same level, passed out flat on a tray. Glassware? Flat and stable and stem-free as possible, so they don't knock over easily. Round appetizers? Nope. They have to have toothpicks, or else those bad boys will roll behind the expensive sofa or into the pool. First rule of hosting: no one likes to see a meatball in a pool. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
In 2021, the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation chartered architectural historian Steve Treinen for a new book on the Indian Canyons area in Palm Springs. Now available, Canyon Country Club, History and Design of Palm Springs' Garden of Eden, explores the architecture and development of the Indian Canyons neighborhood in a volume designed by Sean Adams, Dean of Visual Art and Communication at Art Center College of Design. Edited by Stephen Keelan and photos by Dan Chavkin. Here's our conversation with Steve Treinen.
Steve, before we talk about architecture, as you have some professional experience in this area, what's your favorite Baskin-Robbins flavor?
Oh, my goodness. Probably Cherry's Jubilee.
Cherry's Jubilee?
Yeah.
What's in that, such cherries?
You do your research, don't you?
I
went
do.
way back in time.
Way back in time.
I knew this about you, too, and I failed to hide the Baskin-Robbins. You know, I worked there when I was 15 years old. It was my first job.
Yeah.
And I remember when Barack Obama was president, we're sitting there listening to him do a speech, and he gives this spiel that is exactly the type of thing I say to my kids. You know, when I worked at Baskin-Robbins, in my first job, when I was 15 years old, going to work after I went to high school. So me and Barack Obama share that bit of work history.
I wonder if he likes Cherry's Jubilee as well.
I hope he does. He seems like he would.
So what's your favorite Tom Petty song?
You guys are good. You guys are good. It's impossible to do one, but I'll take Damn the Torpedoes over any album anytime.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Facing the Crowd.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well,
Learning to Fly.
Full Moon Fever was recorded in my home neighborhood in the San Fernando Valley in a garage.
Oh, really?
So.
My favorite is German chocolate cake. Oh, well, that's Baskin-Robbins. Sorry.
Okay, we're back to Baskin-Robbins.
Petty did a lot of music. He may have done a song called that. We're not sure.
So, Steve, tell our listeners, where is Indian Canyons? Just the kind of the basics in Palm Springs.
Sure. Indian Canyons is the neighborhood at the southern end of town. It is south of kind of where the bend in Highway 111 happens, where South Palm Canyon becomes East Palm Canyon. It takes a hard left turn, but if you keep going straight, you'll end up in the Indian Canyons neighborhood.
Okay. Now, is that part of the famous South Ridge area, or is it separate from that?
Separate from that.
Okay.
Separate from that. Yeah. It's if you know where Twin Palms Estates is, it's south of that.
Okay.
Twin Palms used to be kind of the end of town until Canyon Country Club was developed, and what is now known as Indian Canyons.
Okay.
And when was it developed?
Early 1960s, the Canyon Country Club golf course and clubhouse were developed in 1961, and the housing along all the streets that kind of front the golf course, they're all kind of filled in between the early 60s and the mid 1970s.
And the initial round of people that came there, were they just, typical second home people, or was this more a celebrity kind of hangout?
It was more second home people.
Yeah.
Now, celebrities definitely came. Not very many of them lived in the neighborhood, but a lot of them played there.
Okay.
So the golf course was incredibly popular. Sinatra loved it. He was a member there. Bob Hope was a member there. Jack Benny was a member there. Kirk Douglas. There was a lot of members who were famous, but they didn't live there. Sinatra was already at Tamarisk. The other celebrities were mostly here in Palm Springs, but what Canyon gave everyone was a full 18-hole golf course that didn't exist in these Palm Springs proper prior to that.
There hadn't been a golf course?
There was a 9-hole at the O'Donnell Golf Club, and then all the 18-hole golf courses were springing up down valley in places like Thunderbird and Tamarisk.
Okay.
Rancho Mirage area had,
Yep.
a bunch of them at the time.
Yep.
Who designed the master planning for Indian Canyons?
It was a triumvirate of firms. The architecture was Wexler and Harrison, who ended up doing the clubhouse. Landscape architecture was David Hamilton, who was a pretty frequent collaborator with Wexler and Harrison. And then the golf course architect was William Bell and Son. And they were kind of like the Frank Lloyd Wright and Lloyd Wright of golf course architects,
Yeah.
if you could say that. They were prolific, and they have landmark golf courses all across California and Hawaii and Nevada. Yeah.
Yeah, they were quite prolific.
Yep.
So was it a hit from day one?
It was a hit. It was an altogether different thing that Palm Springs had never really seen. The scale of the development was so large, and the fact that it was done on Indian land was really what made it difficult to create. Legislature had to get through the federal government to enable long-term 99-year land leases for this development to
because
happen.
you don't own the dirt that the
Don't.
house sits on.
That's right. So imagine having to sell that
Let's-
concept through to a home buyer
Yeah.
in 1961. Say, okay, I'm going to sell you this incredible house or condominium on this golf course, and you're going to wrap your head around the notion that the American ideal of home ownership doesn't include dirt anymore.
Right.
So they had to sell that through. That made it unique as well. And the scope of the development, we had famous developers of its own in town, like the Alexanders and Roy Fay. And they were largely big fish in the small pond of a small town. Canyon Country Club was 500 acres of land, 300-plus home sites, a golf course and a clubhouse, with the ambition to add a hotel and a second golf course in the kind of first couple years.
Yeah.
So the scope of it was kind of beyond anything anyone had done in town here. So they brought in a publicly traded development corporation from New York called the First National Real Estate and Construction Company. It's a
Sounds legit.
It sounds very legit
Yeah.
and very interesting name. They built skyscrapers in Manhattan, and they went from doing that to developing a country club in the desert on Indian land. But they had the financial wherewithal and the legal resources to negotiate land leases, the types of things people had never done before. Over 25 individual parties had to agree to lease their land to this endeavor. A single holdout would have made the entire thing potentially impossible to do. So it was a lot of kind of business gymnastics that had to happen for this development to come together. But once it did, it was kind of the first. Nowadays, people talk about leased land. It's pretty common here.
Yeah.
That was the first major leased land development.
So essentially people made a house payment on their house and some sort of lease payment
Yep.
to the Indian tribe for the land,
Yep. And they're still doing it.
and they're still doing it. And I assume that lease payment goes up every year. How does that work?
They typically get negotiated on 30-year windows.
Okay.
And 30-year kind of coincides with the length of a typical home mortgage.
Yeah.
So if your lease has less than 30 years on it, you're in the danger zone.
Okay.
Your dwelling becomes harder to sell. because you haven't renegotiated a long enough lease where someone can get a mortgage to buy the home.
That must be happening right now or have just happened, right?
So renegotiations have happened
Yeah.
already. They've been happening for the past couple of decades. And
Because we're coming up on it's 60 years.
yep.
So they've already been through it once.
We've been through
Twice,
it
yeah.
once. Yep.
Yeah.
So you kind of always got to stay 30 years ahead of it is kind of how it plays out.
So what are the characteristics of the homes that are there?
Yeah, it's a combination. And what made it kind of the research interesting for me was it's kind of a grab bag of some well-known designers in Palm Springs who aren't quite on that. They're not quite in the Palm Springs school book,
Yeah.
right? They're maybe a cut below that in terms of awareness. And then there were outsiders. Because these developers came from outside of Palm Springs, they tended to bring their own designers with them in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of held the neighborhood back from really being as well known as other enclaves in the city, where a Wexler and Harrison or a William Cody or someone had done recognized, or Palmer and Kreisel, someone who did things at scale. Now, some of those designers did do work in the neighborhood, but it's been a little bit below the radar. So there's a combination of Hollywood Regency. There's some ranch houses there. There were houses that originally had wood shake roofs. They were more conventional, kind of middle-class tract homes. As they started moving through into the 60s, they started getting bigger and more impressive and a bit more modern.
And how did you choose this neighborhood to write the book about?
My family and I, we've owned a condo down there for a decade, and I've always felt, and in talking to my neighbors, that the neighborhood was under-researched and underappreciated.
Yeah.
And there were these little bits of mystery. You'd go around a corner and you'd see an old sign for Canyon Country Club, kind of like decrepit and teetering, and you go, well, what is that? Or you'd see a golf cart where a decal for Indian Canyons had been slapped over this thing that said Canyon Country Club. And when we first bought it, that was just they were just going through that kind of brand identity change. Well, it was a lot more than a brand identity. It was a transfer of the ownership of the golf course back to the tribe. So when the club, over time, the membership base kind of aged out, they ended up defaulting on their lease. And when that happens, tribe gets whatever you have on their dirt.
Yeah,
right.
So if it's a golf course and a great clubhouse, then that's what they got. So they took over operations of the clubhouse and the golf operations in the 2000s.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's no longer a private country club. It's a public golf course.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Which makes it one of the most off the radar, below the radar, whatever the term is, architectural tours you can take is playing golf on that golf course and seeing the backs of these homes that face into this golf course. You don't even have to be a golfer. You can fake it. I don't really golf, but I like going and hitting a ball around
Does
there.
anybody
because it's beautiful.
organize tours?
They
Jet
don't.
golfing
Yeah,
tours?
They
Yeah, you
should.
sort of have to sneak
They should.
under the radar, so to speak.
They should. It should be a modernist takeover of the golf course.
There you go.
Yeah.
I know that Modernism Week has had several parties in that clubhouse, right? It's quite large.
Yep. Huge capacity. Big building. It's been altered several times over the years. All of it was done by the former ownership before they walked away from it. So it got some pretty rough remodels in the 80s with crystal chandeliers and
Oh, sounds nice.
it's classy if you in a certain light, but
It seems like every remodel in the 80s was bad. I haven't discovered many that were good at all.
No.
Blame Reagan.
Yeah, this was prime 80s. This was 1986, I think, was the year.
Yeah.
And it's been added on to a few times, but the original intent and vision of that building is there. I think it's one of the great modern buildings in Palm Springs. And it was the last building Wexler and Harrison did together before the dissolution of their partnership.
Okay.
So they went solo. And one of the things I did in my book was to look at Wexler and Harrison together and then look at them separately, because Rick Harrison's a great example of a guy who was well known, but people completely lost track of what he did after the breakup of the Beatles. He went to be on to have a great career of his own. So he has a standalone biography in my book, and that's the type of thing I tried to shed light on, those people who were just kind of on the periphery of the well-known stuff here in Palm Springs. So special attention was paid to people like him and Michael Black and Laszlo Sandor and people like that.
One of the things I like about the book, because I'm a font nerd, is the layout. Who did the layout for you?
Okay, so the greatest graphic designer known to man, his name is Sean Adams. He's the Dean of Graphic Design at Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. And I met him when I first started researching the book. I put together this little flyer, this modest little thing that said, I'm going to leave it on people's doorsteps and hope that they respond to me and say, I love your house. I'm working on this research for this book. Would love to feature your house. I'd leave one on the doorstep that turns out to be Sean Adams' house. Oh. And I get a note from him the next day that says, not only would I like to have my house in it, I can design the book for you. And I didn't look at his email signature, and I'm like, oh, great. I really want this
some
house.
Some hack designer.
Some weekend Photoshop hobbyist wants in on this. And I should have been flattered by anybody caring about it, period, at that point. But I look further into it, and this guy's an absolute authority on book design. He's designed books about book design.
Well,
then he designed my book.
That's your sign right there.
To go down to the library and check one of those out.
Yeah.
So I got lucky on that. I hit the jackpot, and he intuitively understood the unique character of his house is in the middle of the book, and once you see his house, you go, oh, I can understand how a guy who lived in that house designed this book, and it was a perfect fit for the subject matter. Yeah.
During this time, late 50s, early 60s, there was some controversy in town as people were struggling with civil rights. Some of the country clubs didn't allow minorities or Jews or something like that. Yep. How was Indian Canyon starting out?
All Jewish.
All Jewish.
All the developers were Jewish. A guy named Robert Grunt, who ran the First National Realty and Construction Snappy Title Company. He was Jewish. He was from New York. He brought with him a partner named Boris Gertzen, who is Russian and Jewish. And they more or less semi-retired here in the desert and developed this. And many of the residents, the early residents, were Jewish. Roy Fay, who ended up being very important in this overall scope down there, he developed around the periphery of the country club. He's the smartest man in town. Yeah. He waited for this big corporation to come in and sink all the money into the golf and the clubhouse. He took up leaseholds to build condos, and that's really where the money was. So he was Jewish.
The condos that you're in or were in?
Mine were actually part of the original master plan.
Okay.
I'm in the Canyon Country Club Colony, which was one of the first kind of, they were built as co-ops back then. It's before the idea of condominium existed. And so Roy Fay was Jewish, and he recruited home buyers from Chicago. So a lot of people were Jewish and from Chicago in that neighborhood.
But it was open to everybody. Right?
Open to everybody.
Yeah.
No, there were covenants in the original CC&Rs, as in most neighborhoods in those days. Mm-hmm. If you were black, you were not buying a house.
Okay.
So that was not unique to that area,
right?
But
everywhere. And that changed with the Civil Rights Act.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But the Jewish identity of the club was important, right? Because, as we know, Tamarisk was built as a reaction to Thunderbird being restricted. Canyon, it was built as a business venture. It wasn't really it wasn't a bunch of Jewish guys saying, we're going to have our own club because they won't let us in that one. Right. It was a business venture.
Yeah, we can make some money off of us.
And they did.
Yeah.
They absolutely did.
So is there a future for the club, the development, or anything kind of on the horizon that you learned when you were doing the book?
Yeah, it's a great moment down there, I think. The tribe never wanted to own a golf course. By the time that happened, they were in the casino business. They had an economic engine that was doing things for them that had nothing to do with... Now, the land leasing was still going on. They were still getting that. In fact, that was really the first economic transformational thing for them, was the leasing of this land. That was kind of the first great infusion of wealth into this tribe here. Didn't mean they wanted to own and operate the club on their ground. Right. They kind of had to do it. And the golf course and the clubhouse have kind of gone up and down in terms of like when it's open and how well it's watered. And I'll say it's probably at an all-time high right now. They dug a new well last summer. They've been irrigating the golf course more than they have since I'd been down there. They recently refurbished the interior of the clubhouse, kind of like a first wave of that. Yeah. They painted the clubhouse the original color scheme. So there's signs of life, of taking interest in the history of the place and maintaining it in a way that is, because it's a careful balance down there. When the golf course starts to go, people get nervous. people say, well, what's to stop the tribe from paving new streets and putting 2-level townhomes right behind my house that faces onto this beautiful green paradise, and I'm going to be looking in the back of someone's condo in here. So there's always been fears about that. Those don't seem to be well-founded. Right now, the neighborhood is kind of looking better than it ever has.
Where can people get the book?
So the book is for sale on the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation website. You can also get it at certain places around town here, like Destination PSP. It'll be for sale at the Palm Springs Art Museum. We have a small network of retailers. So if you're in town, you can pick it up and flip through it. But I think it's a good new book on the scene. I'm excited that it's coming out.
Yeah, it looks great.
It really does. Thanks so much for talking with us, Steve.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We were talking with Steve Treinen. Architect Jim Cioffi moved to the desert in 1957 and is well known in the Palm Springs area for projects including the Pinnacle Homes, the Palm Springs International Airport Taxi Building, Ralph Center, and Smoke Tree Commons. Recently, he remodeled the W Hotel in San Diego, designed the restaurant Valendora at the Rancho Valencia Hotel, and created Chambers Eat and Drink at the Phoenix Hotel in San Francisco. That won a Best Lounge Award from the AIA. Inspired by modernists such as Corbusier and Mies, he's got a new house coming up, the Black House, which, when finished, you can stay at. Plus, there's one building he did not design. Here's George's conversation with architect James Cioffi.
Jim, you've done a lot of great designs here in Palm Springs and the surrounding area, but the one I hear about the most is the Kentucky Fried Chicken. What's that all about?
Well, I really don't know what it's all about, George. It's been attributed to our firm, but we did not do that building.
That wasn't you?
It wasn't us. We think someone copied our design. That design is pretty prominent over at the Sunrise Ramon Ralph Center, that roof shape, and a couple other areas too similar to that. But we think someone just liked it and copied it, the multiple columns and the angled roof.
Do you know who actually did design it?
Do not.
Huh. And I understand that it closed or got auctioned off, something recently we read.
Yes. Kentucky Fried Chicken pulled out. They didn't renew their lease, and it's boarded up, and I think it was auctioned off. Yeah.
Okay. Well, hopefully it'll come back with something exciting, but we want to dispel the myth that you designed it, right?
Thank you for that. And hopefully it'll come back with someone that wants to be in that building and appreciates it. It's a nice building.
You've been here a long time, like 60-some years?
I grew up here.
Okay.
So I came here as a little boy, 6 years old, from Connecticut. So I've been here most of my life, about 68 or 9 years.
And where did you go to school for architecture?
I went to school at University of Arizona.
Okay.
Tucson.
And when did you graduate from there?
75.
Who did you go to work for after you got out?
I went to work for one of my instructors there who was doing a lot of sustainable architecture. And back then it was kind of almost a new field.
Absolutely.
But we were designing solar houses and solar panels and rock storage and things like that. And I actually got to work on one of the first solar houses in Tucson, built in the foothills of Tucson, and got to work on that and enjoyed it. Got to learn a lot about this new solar industry that was just in its very infancy in 1975.
You must have got to hang out with Will Bruder some in Phoenix?
A little bit. I know who he is. I never met him, but he had a practice up in the Scottsdale, Phoenix area.
Okay.
Bruder, and I like his work. He's very well versed in the climate and the indigenous architecture and the climate focused design, that sort of thing. Arizona. Nice
When did
work.
you decide to move back to Palm Springs?
Well, it came a little bit by chance and a little bit otherwise. I decided I could probably be better off with a business in Palm Springs just because of my previous connections and having grown up here than I could in Tucson. I was working at a pretty low hourly rate in Tucson. I was a graduate architect, and I realized that I was making more money as a draftsman before I went away to school. That may sound a little sour grapes, but it was just true at the time. Architects are typically underpaid, and I was being underpaid at the time. So I came back to Palm Springs, started my own business.
And what was your first commission?
We were doing custom homes in the Canyon Country Club area. Our first commissions were that. We did a couple of spec homes in Canyon Country Club that are still there. And then with the same builder, developer, we got a couple of nice commercial buildings to do that are still here and held up pretty well, design-wise. We did some houses between the golf course and the mountain. Mm-hmm. Most recently, the Screen House 1, which is at the end of Ramon on La Mirada, which was one of our nicer ones. That's up against the hill. And Anthony and Brandon both had a part of that. My team, our team now. And nice house. White box on pilotis, and parking underneath, and a cool design.
Since you've been here so long, you've seen Modernism Week from its very beginning.
Yes.
So how was it in the early days?
It was small.
How small?
But some people had a vision, and it caught on. And what we saw, though, really before Modernism Week came around, we saw a resurgence in modern architecture here that started maybe as early as the 80s, where people started to see the Alexander homes and some of the other modern work that was still affordable and still reasonably intact. And there was a resurgence of people's interest in that kind of architecture. For many years, I like to say the 70s and 80s was a kind of a low point in architecture as far as I'm concerned in Palm Springs, because that was that generation of time when everybody did heavy stucco elements and boxes and things like that. And we saw toward the end of the 80s, again, the reclamation of the modern aesthetic and the steel houses and things like that. And they rediscovered Don Wexler, who was kind of in the background for years and years. They rediscovered his steel houses and of course his airport. So we started to see that really come to be in the late 80s. And then, of course, the 90s, everything kind of started blowing up. People started buying the Alexander homes. A lot of them were boarded up and left to go to seed. A lot of them had been plastered over and changed, little tile roof parapets and mansards on them and whatnot. Yeah, so that's when it really happened. And I like to think our business and our designs really started to flourish in the 90s. We got past the heavy stucco box concept.
You know, in the retelling of the history of all these architects in Palm Springs, we like to romanticize them and kind of, that they all hung out together and sipped martinis on each other's porches and things like that. Was that the way it was, or were they more competitive?
Maybe a little of both.
Okay.
I'm reminded of Hugh Captor, for example, who has, who we were partners with. I was a partner with Hugh Captor for about 10 years, from the mid-'80s to mid-'90s. He was neglected because he wasn't an architect, and he was looked down upon by some of the architects here that were pretty prominent. I won't mention their names, but Hugh never was really recognized until later on in his life, when his designs were recognized as being so iconic and special. So I wouldn't say they all got along. I think there was a camaraderie, though, and there always is. Even our firm, as we got established here, we were friendly with most of our peers. Yeah.
Well, there was this explosion of development here when the Indian lands were allowed to be leased for longer periods of time in the early 60s. And it seemed like there was another kind of explosion of growth, maybe in the early 2000s, late 90s, when more and more condos were built. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say that's right. That's accurate. The Indian lands were undeveloped until the 60s because they didn't have the long-term lease capability. And we had some forward-thinking people here, our mayor and others, that helped the Agua Caliente Tribal Council go to Washington and negotiate those leases and lobby for that change. And they were then able to develop their land and become more part of the community, as well as developing from a poor Native American heritage to more of a business heritage.
Because this was way before the casinos that most people are familiar with.
That's true, yeah. The casinos didn't come along till the 80s.
Okay. Yeah. Now, most recently, you're working on a project called the Black House. What's that about?
Well, that's an interesting story, and people think it's a black house because it's black, and that actually happened a little bit later. The original name of the Black House was because our client and owner of the Black House was a woman named Amy Black. And so it became the Black House, and our firm before it was black. Later on, as we developed the design, and Brandon Newell worked with me on the design, and later on Anthony Cioffi did the interior design, but it was determined that we'd put black metal on it and then really call it the Black House.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of how the name came about. And it's quite an iconic look from Vistacino. A lot of people wondered what it was because it looked like a big giant storage container. Basically, it's just a big, long, low, black ribbed metal box with a hole in the middle for a door. And then it more opens up to the backyard.
You're making it sound so attractive.
It's very, it's very, very attractive to me. It's attractive to us, yes.
Now, why black? You would think in Palm Springs, where it gets to be 120 in the summer, have you got some special secret formula that keeps it from getting hot on the inside?
Well, the whole back of the house and sides are white. So it's the street look that's black. The design was, it turned its back on the street. It was a busy street. Vistacino is a busy road, and so it was meant to turn its back on the street and open the house up to the yard and pool and all that. That's on the north side of the house.
It's quite a big piece of property, really. You've got a large area for the pool, and there's like little mini golf greens out there?
Yes, and after Brandon got the exterior design wrapped up and we had the plans and had the house built, Anthony came along and we contacted the owners and we put together an agreement to do the interiors. So Anthony took some concepts for the interiors. He took an analogy of the airport flights that go over the house. And so he designed the landscape to look like a sweep hand of a radar screen, and then carried that aeronautical theme into the house too, with mirrors shaped like airplane windows and whatnot. So it had a very unique concept to do something special with the interior as well. When we look at the house from a drone or from an airplane, you'll see the angle of the sweep hand of a radar screen that bisects the lot, goes through the house and bisects into the backyard, which makes it extremely interesting. And we think it'll be interesting to fly over when you fly over in an airplane.
Oh, sure.
So
you would certainly be able to see it from a flight coming in.
You would.
One direction.
It flies right over it.
Right.
Yes. And so we have Brandon, who did this iconic color and shape with low clear story windows instead of high clear story windows along the bottom, so the house tends to float off the ground. And then Anthony, who did a cool interior and landscape analogy.
Now, unlike a lot of homes in Palm Springs, this one is not designed so much for a family to live in. This is going to be a rental house that people can have for themselves.
Yes, it was always meant to be a vacation rental or short-term rental. So it has multiple bedrooms in the main house, and then it also has a separate guest house, separate suite guest house as well. Lots of areas in the yard for, again, a putting green, lots of sunning areas, a nice pool, things like that that people come to expect. Yeah.
I've heard they've really changed the rules about vacation rentals here in town.
Well, they've had to adjust the rules as they went along. The vacation rental phenomenon kind of blew up, and it kind of blew up on the city. They got vacation rentals too close to each other. They got pockets of vacation rentals that were problem areas in terms of noise and parking and traffic and things like that. So they had to start regulating it a little more closely. And I think it's evolved now into a legitimate business. I think they've been able to control vacation rentals so that they more assimilate into the neighborhoods. But there's still a faction here that doesn't like them. They don't.
Yes.
They think that their neighborhoods are being intruded upon by outsiders.
Invaders.
So there's that. But generally, I think people have started to get used to the vacation rental, and we've worked on several now in the last 5 or 6 years. And for the most part, people are very cognizant of the noise, and they post signs on their vacation rentals, no music outside, things like that.
They manage them well.
They do.
I guess my question was in terms of thinking through this as a project, because I know there are permits for this you have to get now. If you're building a new vacation rental, do you have to get the permit first and wait till it's cleared, or how do you do that so that by the time the building is finished, you can actually rent it?
Well, the first thing you do is you have to do a little research and make sure the location is okay for a vacation rental, because there are limits to how many can be in certain areas.
Okay.
And that was really the only determinant. Other than that, the city issues a permit and they collect a fee and that sort of thing.
So if you're under the limit in that neighborhood, it's pretty easy.
It's not that special a situation.
In the Black House, I had never seen a clear story window down at the bottom of the wall. How does this work?
Works very well. When the lights are on in the house floats off the ground. It's very interesting, and it lets light into the house without having privacy issues. We thought it would work well, and it does.
I guess I was wondering about the privacy part of it, because normally when a clear-story window is up 8 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet, nobody's looking in up there. So what's the advantage of putting it down low, really?
Well, the intent, again, was to get the box to float
Okay.
off the site.
Okay.
That was the main intent. Those windows will have some tint on them and whatnot, so the privacy won't be an issue if anybody crawls on their hands and knees and tries to look in.
Yeah, which happens a lot, right?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
And I also suspect, too, that at night, if you light up the house, it's going to have this really cool look from the street with having that band of light around the bottom.
That's the intent. Yeah, that was the
Okay.
intent.
What is next for you and your firm here in Palm Springs? What projects are you working on?
Well, we have several interesting ones. One about to wrap up that we're real proud of, and that's the renovation of the Bermuda Dunes Airport.
Okay, yep.
So we're real proud of that. We really reimagined that space.
That's private, all private airport?
Private airport. We did the interiors with Anthony did a lot of the interior design and furnishings. Brandon was able to help us put together all the technical documents. We did all new glazing and reimagined the lounge areas and that sort of thing. It was a 60s airport that had been getting a little aged.
Long in the tooth.
Yeah, long in the tooth would be a polite term. It was in pretty rough shape. We were fortunate that we had owners who took a real interest in spending enough money to make it what it is. So we're grateful for that. We have a new screen house that's about to start construction. It'll be Screen House 3, and it is up in Southridge on one of the last remaining lots in Southridge. It's just below the Bob Hope House. We're excited about that. We did a rather interesting home there. It's a simple box, but it's surrounded by metal screens to screen it from the sunlight where all the glass is, and the screens are on rollers, so they open and close. And we're proud of that. That starts construction soon, so it'll be built over the summer. We have a couple of good customs in the Canyon Country Club area that we're working on right now that we're pleased with. The newest is the Air Museum, Palm Springs Air Museum, where we reimagined the entry to the Air Museum. And
That's a great place to visit. I really enjoy that.
You should see it now with the new colonnade in front. Their fabric-wrapped colonnade, that a little bit reminiscent of the work we did at Smoke Tree Commons with the fabric structures there. We added a new classroom building to take the Air Museum into the next generation of thought and teaching, where they can teach students not just the Air Museum original history was, basically based on World War II, but now it takes us into the more modern age, and so we have young people that'll be going to classrooms there and learning more about the history moving forward. So we're excited about that, and that'll be finishing up this summer.
Did you guys go for the expansion of the Palm Springs Airport?
No.
No?
No, we did work at the airport, though. We've done work over the years at the airport. Our first work at the airport was the taxi holding building. It fronts on El Cielo.
Yep.
And it's a cool building. It represents kind of an airplane wing with shape of the roof, with the angles and the holes in the roof. And then went on to do additional work there, TSA addition and expansion. The TSA situation, it was overcrowded. We had
inside the terminal?
Inside the terminal, And we did that about 3 years ago, I think, 3 or 4 years ago when it's finished. And that added a lot to get the congestion from TSA going, and they're still now having to expand it even further. The airport's had a tremendous success, and becoming an international airport had a lot to do with it as well. So,
yeah, you're getting Mexico, Canada.
Sure.
I don't think Europe is coming in yet, is it?
Washington, D.C.
D.C. is,
from
yeah.
D.C., yeah.
D.C.
They down in D.C., and then from D.C. they come to...
On United.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're waiting to get more East Coast flights into Palm Springs, which I'm sure will happen with the addition of all these dates.
Yes. The challenge is to take the airport into the next version and expand it so it accommodates all the visitors we have coming here, but keeping the Palm Springs feel of that airport.
The vibe.
The vibe, at least. The last edition of the airport was quite nice, where the Bono concourse and the fabric structures that are centered off the center of the original Wexler building. Mm-hmm. The challenge now is to enlarge the baggage area, enlarge the gates, and have more planes and that sort of thing, but keep it as nice to travel from as it is now. It's everyone that travels in and out of our airport says it's the best experience they've ever had in an airport. And we
It
need to
is.
make sure we keep sight of that.
It is pretty sweet.
Is there a website for the Black House?
It will be on our website. It's currently posted on our Instagram sites right now. There's some progress construction drawings and photos. I'm told that there's a video on YouTube that was just made because it was in today's Palm Springs Post.
Okay.
There'll be a pretty major event there, probably for the pre-Modernism week in October.
Okay.
We'll probably have an event there. We were trying to get it done for February, but we were unable to get the house completed in time. So we've put that off till October, and we're thinking that's going to be a nice event.
And what's your Instagram?
Cioffi_architect. Thanks, Anthony. Yeah.
The Instagram is Cioffi_architect, and
Right.
the website is
CioffiArchitect.com.
.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cioffi Architect.
Thanks so much for stopping by and saying hello.
Thank you for having me.
George was talking with architect James Cioffi. Helen Thompson is a nationally recognized writer and producer specializing in architecture, design, and food. She began her career at Texas Monthly, where she spent nearly 20 years as a writer and managing editor of Domain, the magazine's design-focused publication. For 14 years, she spotlighted modern architecture and gardens in Metropolitan Home, and she's the author of Santa Fe Modern, Texas Made, Texas Modern, and Marfa Modern. Her latest book doesn't have a title, but it's all about Aspen modernism. So welcome, Helen.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you.
Helen, before we start talking about architecture, tell me how to play the game called Apartment.
You've stumped me with your first question. Oh, that apartment.
Yeah.
You know why? Because Metropolitan Home's first iteration was called Apartment Life, which was sort of what my early life ended up merging into, my little apartment in my childhood home, where I built a nice courtyard outside my closet and added a kitchen and had a little life going on that was separate from my real childhood life.
So you built an apartment in your bedroom.
Yes, that was the warning sign that there was more to come and probably worse. So
When I looked this up, it said the game consisted of an elaborate construction process that involved emptying one of your bedroom closets, establishing a long wall comprised of a blue metal doll's bed frame balanced on its side, plus boxes and a toy stove. The arrangement extended perpendicular to the closet door, creating a gracious enclosure, perfect as both courtyard and living room. Wow, you were really into this as a kid.
I'm afraid that's true, yes.
Now, did this game have rules, and how did you win?
Well, they were my rules, so I was
but-
always a winner.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So did you invite guests to the apartment?
You know, oddly, I'm a little reclusive despite my seeming gregariousness, and I think I just enjoyed that little apartment all by myself.
And did you change out the interior design from time to time?
I am a furtive furniture mover.
Yeah.
So yes,
Yes.
late nights, you could often find me moving things, and I'm sorry to say that is a tendency that has still persisted.
No, that's fine. I mean, this is what you do. We would expect you to do something like that.
Well, I'm supposed to be a writer, but I'm afraid tinkering was the beginning of it all.
Yeah. You also have a real passion for food. So what's latest on the food scene?
Well, you know, things in Santa Fe are pretty eclectic here. We've got our Southwestern food, of course, but things have not been quite the same since the pandemic. So I think restaurants are still experimenting.
You have done some great books on modernism in Santa Fe and in Texas and in the Marfa area of Texas. You're working now on modernism in Aspen. What's happening in Aspen?
Well, Aspen is a really interesting topic. That trilogy that started with Marfa Modern and then became Texas Made, Texas Modern, the second book, and then Santa Fe Modern, I was not expecting to write a trilogy, and now it seems that I have written a tetralogy, I guess. So Aspen Modern it's a logical result of these other three books that I started working on. I became fascinated with how modernism, which to me is basically an urban European movement, it translated to the United States so well, and it translated into an environment and terrain that is completely not like what's in Europe. So the Marfa Modern was the first book, and I wasn't really thinking about any kind of sequels. I just came to the conclusion that these houses in Marfa were very idiosyncratic. Donald Judd had a big influence on Marfa, and his art had an influence on who came to Marfa and how they built.
Yeah. Can you explain about Marfa a little bit? I mean, I've heard of it,
Yeah.
but I know it's not exactly as big as Dallas.
Well, it's now very trendy.
Yeah.
Very popular.
Yeah. Was really a railroad stop in far West Texas. And, Texas is huge. West Texas is also huge. So Marfa's, it's 9 hours west of Houston, 7 or 8 hours west of Austin. It's in the middle of nowhere. And Donald Judd wanted to be in a place like that so he could do his site-specific art. But I think the internet allowed other people to come there and pursue their passions. And it has become a very popular destination. And there's a lot of art there and a lot
Big
of
art,
artists.
big art, gigantic art.
Is there.
Yeah. So
Huge art.
what's in Aspen?
Well, Aspen, there are two Aspens. There was the original Aspen of the late 1800s. It has now evolved into a very glamorous, also trendy setting. And I know you know the stereotype.
Expensive, yes.
But modernism actually came into the American West through the portal of Aspen. And I don't know that most people, if you stopped a person on the street and said, where did modernism come from? How did it arrive in the United States? They'd probably say New York, and it didn't. It came through Chicago during the war when a lot of the creatives and the architects were fleeing, particularly those from the Bauhaus. They were invited to Chicago by Walter Paepcke, who was the head of the Container Corporation of America. And then he envisioned Aspen, which he kind of discovered it was an abandoned silver mining town. They wanted to build an Ideas Institute there in the 50s. So that's when he started inviting modernist architects there to build.
That was Herbert Bayer, right?
Yes, Herbert Bayer became his go-to person and developed a lot of Aspen's modernist structures. So I have a couple of Bayers. There are not many residences that he did that are still remaining, but I've got two in the book. And modernism has thrived there. So it's a story that is not well known. And I think that is how modernism eventually goes west and becomes sort of a real, true American architecture.
When people go to Aspen, what are some of the buildings that they can see? I mean, obviously they can't visit the houses, but are there any public buildings they can go through that are modern?
Well, almost the entire Aspen Institute is Herbert Bayer designed, and that's right in the middle of town. When you drive through on Main Street, you can see some modernist structures still standing. There's a good website called aspenmodern.org that will tell you where some of the places are, and there's still some small houses in the middle of town that you can drive by.
aspenmodern.org. Who runs that site?
It's a nonprofit. I don't know who the head of it is, but it has documented what buildings were there and what remain and who the architects were that were there. I think it's vital for an awareness of how American architecture has become American and not a reflection of Roman and classical style architecture that you see in the Northeast and the South. Those were more focused on ideals, political ideals. And modernism had a whole other gaze into another kind of way of living.
The book, which will come out in mid-2025, is going to be about Aspen modernism. Title, as yet undetermined. Thanks so much for talking with us, Helen.
My pleasure.
We were talking with Helen Thompson. Born in Norman, Oklahoma, home to modernist architects such as Bruce Goff, Herb Green, and Henry Kemphefner, Champian Fulton began taking piano lessons from her grandmother at age 5. By the time she was 10, Champian had performed at jazz legend Clark Terry's 75th birthday party. With influences from Dinah Washington, Sarah Vaughan, Charlie Parker, Sonny Clark, Thelonious Monk, and Art Tatum, She graduated in jazz piano performance from SUNY Purchase. Since then, she's shared the stage with Lou Donaldson, Frank West, Scott Hamilton, Nicholas Payton, Jimmy Cobb, and Louis Hayes. Champian has become a fixture at Birdland in New York and has recorded 18 albums, including Bird Song, celebrating Charlie Parker, and fan favorites like Speechless and After Dark, honoring Dinah Washington. Recent projects include Flying High with Jazz at the Ballroom, where she serves as pianist and artistic director. Welcome, Champian.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
We are so glad to have you on the show. I wanted to start because our ACE research team has discovered that you have never seen a Charlie Brown Christmas. Is this true?
Oh my gosh. Yes, I'm sorry. That's embarrassing, I think, actually, but I haven't.
Are you going to correct this one of these years?
Well, so I meant to watch it this year.
Yeah.
Actually, that was what I was going to do. I was going to remedy this year, but the holiday season is so intensely busy for me, and I didn't really get to watch anything. So it has to happen before next Christmas.
It's only half an hour long.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know, it's short. And the thing is, actually, a few years ago, I read the new bio, Charles Schulz's biography that came out, and it was fascinating. And I thought he was so interesting. And yet I really haven't seen any of the shows. I used to read the comic strip in the newspaper.
Everybody did.
But I haven't seen any of the shows.
And the jazz story behind this, of course, is Vince Guaraldi, who came to fame with the soundtracks for all the Charlie Brown specials. The Thanksgiving one, the Christmas one, the Halloween one. And he produced many, many albums based off of that long association with the cartoon.
No, I know. I find it a strange gap in my cultural experience, but I haven't seen it.
Well, I've never seen the Lord of the Rings films. And, my sci-fi friends are aghast that I've not had this cultural experience yet. But I think everybody has something like that they just somehow missed being, we're having other things to do.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's funny.
So your grandmother was your first piano teacher.
Yeah.
How did that lead into a performance for Clark Terry's birthday party?
Well, my father plays trumpet and flugelhorn, and that was his mother, my grandmother, Chris. She played piano. And I was around music, and I just wanted to be a jazz musician because my father, Stephen Fulton, he was really good friends with Clark Terry, and they were always having so much fun. And I wanted to have fun with them. So I wanted to be a musician myself. And my grandmother started teaching me basics, at the piano when I was very little. I fell in love with it. And Clark and my father both, of course, were very supportive of my dream to be a jazz musician. And so Clark hired me and my little band for his birthday party. That year I was 10. So I was 10 when he was 75. And that was my first paying gig.
And you were dreaming of being a jazz musician at ages 9 and 10.
Oh, yeah. But
you dream big.
From age 3.
Okay.
I was, yeah, wow. I was very
driven.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I liked other things. I really love history and reading. And my mother thought maybe I would like to go into law. I was never going to be a doctor. That wasn't an interest. But I just wanted to be a jazz musician as long as I can remember.
Oh, well, that is awesome. Now, at this birthday party, I understand that it wasn't just you. You had other 12-year-old there with you. Weren't they performing with you as the band?
Oh, yes. That was my band at the time, and we were called the Little Jazz Quintet, and we were all under the age of 12. And yeah, it was a quintet. There was 5 of us, and we would rehearse. We didn't really have too many gigs, maybe I remember we played at the Christmas tree lighting in my town. And we played at Clark's birthday party. It was a wonderful experience, of course, for me. It really was life-changing.
And what year was this?
That would have been in 95 because Clark was born in 20. So that would have been in 1995.
You're kind of pre-internet there.
Yeah. Oh,
if
yeah.
If you guys had been filmed, you'd be viral now for sure.
Oh, absolutely. No, but back then, I think maybe somebody's parents had one of those giant recorders with you put the VHS tape in,
Oh, the big ones.
And, yeah, the big ones.
Sure.
And I don't think we filmed anything, it was back then, you just lived your life. We didn't film everything. So too bad. That would be a nice memory to have.
Well, let's hear one of your songs. Tell me about That's Not Your Donut.
Oh, this is a really fun blues. It comes from my album Speechless. And I wrote this blues kind of with Oscar Pettiford in mind, kind of a line like that.
Wait a second. Oscar Pettiford or Oscar Peterson?
Oscar Pettiford.
Oh, I don't know him.
He's a bassist, famous bass player, also from Oklahoma, where I'm from. And peer of Charlie Christian, I guess. I mean, we're going back a ways in the history of jazz. The title comes from a funny thing that was said to me in my band at an event we were playing. We were playing a private party in a big hotel, and we were in a ballroom, and across the hall was another ballroom. And in the middle, there were all these like snacks. And my drummer picks up a donut, and he starts eating this donut. And the woman at the hotel freaked out, and she was like, "No, that's not your donut. That's Goldman Sachs' donut."
Faux pas.
And we just thought it was really funny. So we kept saying it to each other. And so I titled the song this.
Here's Champion with That's Not Your Donut. was really cool, Champion. I can tell that you were having fun with that.
Yeah, it's a fun one. And of course, it's always nice to blow on a blues.
Now, we've also learned that you have a wonderful collection of old media, cassettes and CDs.
Yeah.
How many of these have you got?
Oh, gosh. I actually don't know how many CDs I have. LP-wise, I think my father and I, we have about like 1,200 records, LP records.
Wow.
Probably about the same CD-wise. But to be honest, there are many people with way larger collections that I meet these days. But the thing I love about our collection is like every single record is one that we enjoy to listen to.
So you can play them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're for use.
Wow.
And what about the cassettes? Because they do deteriorate over time.
Yeah, they do. I mean, we have a lot of cassettes, mostly not commercial cassettes, like things we tape.
Home recordings.
Bootlegs that, take your machine and you would like tape somebody's gig, or, we used to tape a lot of programs off the radio. We have quite a bit of that. And then, of course, we would make tapes for the car because the car used to only play cassettes, so you'd have to have whatever you wanted to listen to in the car. You
make a mixtape.
A mixtape, indeed.
When I inherited a lot of my father's stuff, he had any number of cassettes.
Mm-hmm.
And I found this neat little thing on Amazon. It was like $30.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically a tape player that you hooked into your USB port. And it did an amazing job of digitizing some of this stuff.
Yeah, that must have been before you met me.
That's so cool.
Yeah, way before I met you, Tom.
Yeah, because I have a cassette deck at home hooked up to a computer, and I didn't get it on Amazon. I got it years and years ago.
Now, you've become a fixture at Birdland, which is a famous New York jazz club. What keeps you coming back to that stage?
I love that club. I first played there, now it's been more than 20 years. It's a beautiful room. I don't know if you've been. It has a lot of history, of course, in the name. And I love the people that work there. I love the owner. It's just become a home base for me in New York. And I'm very lucky to have that because it's a great place.
Well, here is another song by Champion. It's All Right With Me. It was written by Cole Porter for the 1953 musical Can-Can. It was also used in the Cole Porter musical High Society. It's been recorded by Bing Crosby, Peggy Lee, Harry James, Frank Sinatra, of course, Crystal Gale, Tom Waits, Harry Connick, Mel Torme, Susanna McCorkle, who we lost way too young. Mm-hmm. Here's Champion with It's All Right With Me.
It's the wrong time and the wrong place. Though your face is charming, it's the wrong face. It's not his face, but such a charming face that it's all right with me. It's the wrong song in the wrong style. Though your smile is lovely, it's the wrong smile. It's not his smile, but such a lovely smile that it's all right with me. You can't know how happy I am that we met. I'm strangely attracted to you. There's someone I'm trying so hard to forget. Don't you want to forget someone too? It's the wrong game with the wrong chips. Though your lips are tempting, they're the wrong lips. They're not his lips, but such tempting lips that if some night you're free, then it's all right. It's all right. It's all right with me. You can't know how happy I am that we met. I'm strangely attracted to you. There's someone I'm trying so hard to forget. Don't you want to forget someone too? It's the wrong game with the wrong chips. Though your lips are tempting, they're the wrong lips. They're not his lips, but such tempting lips that if some night you're free, then it's alright. It's alright. It's alright with me.
So, Champion, what have you got coming up? Where can people see you?
I'm celebrating the release of my new record, which is called At Home, on Turtle Bay Records. It just came out on Friday. This is my 19th album. So I'm really excited about this. It's a great record, and I'm going to be touring it basically now through this summer. So I'm in Sweden right now, and next weekend, which is May 16 and 17, I'm going to be down in Hilton Head, South Carolina at the Jazz Corner before we go back to New York City, and I'll be at Mesro, which is a really nice intimate club in the Village, May 23rd and May 24th.
Well, that is so cool. You can learn more about Champion at champion.net. That's CHAMPIAN.net. Thanks so much for spending time with us, Champion.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much. It was nice.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs. Okay, Tom, let's get an Uber and head on over to a great sushi place.
All right. Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 25,000 significant modernist houses, and access 5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Bobby Morris. Accurate is her middle name, or it could be Alberta. We really don't know.
We don't.
U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back again next week and in 2 weeks with more fascinating guests from Modernism Week 2025 in Palm Springs.
Sassy is her middle name, or it could be Saskatchewan. We can do this all day.
That's right.